Live from the Plutopia verse, this is the Plutopia News Network Happy Hour. Our guest tonight is Tracy Schultz, who should be coming in stylishly late, I hope.
Well, we hope he comes.
And the unusual suspects are here. I'm Scoop Sweeney, zooming in from Rancho Chorizo Duro. And over there in South Austin, that's John Lebkowski. Hello, John. Hey,
I'm
we're
right
dressed like
here.
twins. You've got your Plutopia.
There we go.
I've got my Plutopia t-shirt
Open my
on.
Guinness stout.
Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
you,
Mm-hmm.
you have your stout. I've got my Cabernet, so I think we're adequately fueled tonight.
There we are. And I am prepared tonight to talk about South by Southwest.
Good.
Before I do, let me see if I can find out what happened to our guest. Let's see. Nope, he's not going to make it.
Oh, okay.
I just got the message from him that let's see. Uh I will say come if you can before 8 p.m. Ah, there we go.
All righty then.
So
It's just us, the brain trust
that's right.
from Plutopia. And I only have half a brain today, so I hope you brought extra.
Well, I'm actually here to talk about South by Southwest, and I can probably talk quite a bit about it.
Hmm. And I can,
You've been there? No.
yes. But the fact that I've been there means I must stay away. I
Ah,
don't.
now
I
why is that?
Yeah, I don't like crowds and traffic and people pitching me on their latest product. Come on, you got to have one. No, I don't want one. That gets old after a while.
I'm going to acknowledge that there is a marketing aspect to South by Southwest. This is true.
Really? I was just guessing. I just thought maybe there were a bunch of lost salespeople that showed up there when I was there.
You know, it's pushing 40 years now. It's like, I think 37 years this South by Southwest has been happening.
It's old
And
enough
it
to
has,
drink.
yeah, it has a pretty interesting history. What happened was that back in the 80s in New York, they had this new music seminar or a new music festival, really. They basically had music all over the place, you know, and um, um, you could you could go to this thing and see a bunch of bands. And those guys were thinking, man, it would make sense to do this in Austin, which is supposed to be the live music capital of the world, right?
Hmm.
So they were talking to Roland Swenson at the who was with at the Austin Chronicle, and um, the the conversation went on for a while, and they kind of talked about doing a clone of that event here, but it never came to anything. But Roland started talking to his compadres there at Austin Chronicle, Lewis Black and Nick Barbaro in particular, and said, "Well, why don't we just do our own?" So they started a music festival to showcase local and regional bands, and I guess bring in some other bands from elsewhere. So that was the start. That was 1987, a long, long time ago.
The whole
Um,
that it started with was local bands, and that's what the whole new music thing in New York was. Trying to get some recognition for the talent that wasn't getting the notice that the big stars were getting, and yeah, that seemed to be what South by was looking for. Our late friend Ed Ward, made a big point of that. He hoped it would be a big boost for all the local folk.
and Ed was another person who was very involved in the genesis of South by Southwest for sure. And of course, Ed and I, for years, had a breakfast during South by Southwest where he would invite music people and I would invite internet people. And that went on for many years until just before he sadly passed away. Um, so they did music for, oh, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, I guess 7 years. And in 1994, they decided to add film and multimedia. And by multimedia, at the time, what that meant was CD-ROMs that you could put in a computer and have some kind of like interactive media experience with these CD-ROMs. And the guy who came up with the idea to do that was Dewey Winburn, the late Dewey Winburn, who I think he was in that business, and he was uh, he was focused on the idea of using these new technologies for social good, and he thought that a good place to kind of promote that kind of thinking would be at this event. So adding that to music was um, an early attempt to bring technology into the event. And in addition to that, they added film that year. So you had a film festival that was very focused on independent film. And then you had this multimedia festival or multimedia piece of the festival that was basically a bunch of computers in a room. I remember going there and there were all these computers lined up uh, with various kinds of interactive media that you could put into them, again on CD-ROM. There was no sense of having an internet connection to the computers at that time. And in fact, I started very quickly lobbying for that because I was already an adopter of the internet. I was quite involved in the internet. I had a company at that time called Fringeware, which was it was a company that Paco Nathan and I started. And we started it kind of with the intention of selling products online, but you couldn't do that back then because there was no confidence that you could secure the transactions. Uh, Sending a credit card number in plain text online was like nobody was going to go for that. The banks wouldn't give you uh, an ability to accept credit cards if you were going to accept them online. And that forced us to create a store. It was kind of a store within a store. It was at a place called New Bohemia, a fringeware store where we sold these various products that we actually used an email list in part to find sources of products, to kind of get the word out. Let's let everybody know that we're working on a way to sell products online, and let's source the products and figure out how to get them, you know, warehoused here so that we can sell them. And ultimately, we started a magazine with a catalog in the back. The magazine was called Fringeware Review, and we used that to sell products. And in addition to selling products, we were writing a lot about the sort of new emerging digital culture and fringe cultures that were manifesting online. And Monty McCarter, who was the art director for Fringeware Review, and I uh, requested, he also was a photographer, so we requested press passes for South by Southwest when we heard that there was this multimedia component. And that's how we came to be at that particular South by Southwest event in 1994. We showed up with press passes and, covered it in a sense, tried to learn what we could about what was going on. So at that time, there was no idea of South by Southwest Interactive. But I think South by Southwest Interactive came like after maybe 3 or 4 years. So Hugh Forrest was, along with Dewey Winburn, a founder of the multimedia part of the event, which became interactive. And Hugh became sort of like my contact for the event over the years, and we've become really good friends since then. At the time, I was telling Hugh that maybe you should consider some internet related content for South by Southwest, that might make sense. And I'm sure he was hearing that from a lot of other people. So that did eventually happen. And eventually you had this like South by Southwest Interactive. I think, let me take a quick look. Let's see if I have it here. There's an article about South by Southwest on Wikipedia. And when you look at that, there's like a few paragraphs about the music division, a few about the film division, but there's just one sentence about interactive. And it says that it focuses on emerging technology, includes the trade shows, speakers, parties, and startup accelerator. Well, I have more to say about that in a minute. So the Wikipedia article here, it does say that in 1994, South by Southwest named it the South by Southwest Film and Multimedia Conference. That kind of went along with the music conference. And that year, Johnny Cash was the keynote speaker, by the way, when they still had a keynote speaker rather than multiples as they have now. In 1995, they separated film from multimedia. And I suppose, but I'm not sure. Okay, I've got it. So the date that they changed multimedia to interactive was 1999. So in 1999, South by Southwest Interactive first appeared with that name, having been multimedia before, and was pretty focused, I mean, pretty much focused on the internet by then. They were bringing in a lot of internet content. So that was when it became kind of a cutting edge conference. But it was the thing about South by Southwest earlier on was that it was very focused on independent and DIY media, and not so much on big media like as it is today. I mean, today it's big media, corporate media. It has a really big presence there.
Yeah.
But that was really not how it was at the inception.
Yeah, back when this was happening, I was working in IT in the Bay Area, and we started to hear about the interactive festival going on, and some of our managers said, we're doing that kind of thing. Maybe we should be out there. I said, and we looked into it, and it just didn't seem like a fit for like medical IT, which we were doing. But I got a lot of interest from friends of mine in Austin who were telling me about how cool it was starting to be. So I really wanted to come out, but it took me a while to get out to see what was going on with that. But it ended up being a really big deal for IT people.
Yeah, they have a pretty significant health track at this point. So, but early on, there was a thing about the internet, and it became about blogging, and it became about digital culture and all of that. But what happened between now and then was digital convergence, basically. And we saw this coming back in, like 2005 or so. Actually, so what happened, interestingly enough, this has a lot to do with Plutopia, in fact. And I believe we started talking about this in 2004. There was in the early 2000s a thing called the South Texas Digital Convergence Initiative. And I was a member of that. I was part of that. It was like basically a kind of cartel. It was a bunch of like technology guys here in Austin who were meeting and discussing the fact that all media was going to become digital media. We could see it coming. It hadn't happened yet. They didn't have, smartphones then, in fact. This was just before the smartphones appeared. And, we could see like this substantial change that was going to have tremendous impact, especially on business and on the way the media business, especially in the way media was delivered. So we started trying to build a sort of regional strategy. The leader of the pack at this digital convergence initiative was a guy named Alex Cavalli, who had worked at IC Squared Institute here, which is a think tank that was founded by George Kosmetsky, who was a famous entrepreneur here in the Austin area. And this think tank was focused on economic development. So the Digital Convergence Initiative was a big economic development project, and we were trying to, we saw that digital is sort of a sector that works across at various sectors. It was kind of horizontal, and it connected to all different kinds of business. And we had that as part of our vision, and we saw various technologies starting to emerge. For instance, we take for granted now that you can watch 4K high def movies on your flat screen television set. Well, that kind of technology did not exist at the time, but was being created. People were working on it, and they were working on it right here in Austin. So we were bringing those people in. And at South by Southwest 2005, we were going to have a presence. And originally, our plan for that presence was that we were going to create a big installation that we were going to put in a trade show. There was, at the time, there was a little bit of a slump, especially around digital, because, the internet supposedly ended in 2000, right? .com bust. And it was sort of like working its way back into the reality of the world. And at this time, the South by Southwest trade show had some room in it that they could make available to us to create a big installation, fairly big installation, that we started referring to as Futurama, after like the old World's Fair event that was called Futurama. So Futurama was kind of our code name for this thing that we were going to do. And the idea that we had was that we were going to create an installation that showed multiple things about the manifestation of digital convergence and how it was going to affect things. And some of it would be smoke and mirrors, and some of it would be stuff already in existence. So we met over and over again. We whiteboarded a lot, and we had a bunch of big conversations, and we had a bunch of big ideas, and we had some great ideas. But when we started trying to raise money, we realized that it was going to take more time than we had to raise the money and build out the event. We had only like a couple of months, I think, to do it. So we did a couple of other things. Instead of doing the installation, we had a big party during South by Southwest, a big digital convergence party. We had it at the Austin Ballet Theater. And we brought a bunch of people in to sort of, we had panels, we had people talking about digital convergence. And at the very end of the party, there was um, a webcast basically. And what we did was we did something that nobody had really done before, as far as we knew. We piped in a high definition, big screen webcast of a band that was playing in San Antonio. I think it might have been Grupo Fantasma, but it was a band that was playing in San Antonio. And we got it with, big sound, HD display, really huge screen, and kind of amazing. So that was one of the things that we did. The other thing that we did was I made an agreement with South by Southwest as a representative of the Digital Convergence Initiative to program a digital convergence track. So we had a whole track about digital convergence during that year's South by Southwest. And there were people who came, they kind of figured out there were a couple of rooms where all of our programming was for that track, and they just sort of camped out there, and it turned out to be a pretty popular, set of sessions. I think we did pretty well with it. And since we didn't get to do Futurama, we were kind of like disappointed about that. But Alex Cavalli and Derek Woodgate Derek Woodgate had been involved too in this thing that we were doing, had a conversation afterwards where I was saying, you could actually create events like we were thinking about creating that could be very high tech, future focused, um, inclusive of all kinds of interesting things. You could go to the fringes, you could bring in a lot of art, music, whatever, and that would be an interesting thing to do. And that is what led to the creation. There's a longer story, which I won't get into now since we're more talking about South by Southwest, but there's a whole story about how that led to the creation of the big Plutopia event that we did during South by Southwest, and the company called Plutopia Productions, which no longer exists, but at the time it was going to be a production company to create these kinds of events. And the events that we were having every year at South by Southwest were kind of like showpieces for that. And of course, you were quite involved with that too, Scoop.
That was quite interesting for me, being a new implant here in the Austin area, coming from the Bay Area, and seeing what had happened to South by Southwest. It was pretty amazing, because Ed Ward had kind of kept me in touch with what was going on, and it sounded interesting, but it was way more than interesting. It was a extravaganza of technology that I'd never being around Silicon Valley and the East Bay in the San Francisco Bay Area. I thought I'd seen all the things you could see in technologies. Like, no, this was way above anything I saw out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and that was like, to me, that was the turning point. That was it was it was at that, like, over that year or two, 2005 to 2006, 7, and leading up to the introduction of the smartphone and so forth, that digital convergence started settling in, and the world that we have now uh, emerged from that. That was a pretty great and classic time, I thought. And South by Southwest was, of course, affected by that because, they had the interactive conference, which it was sort of like it was patched on to South by Southwest initially, but it became the centerpiece for South by Southwest. And it started to dominate since all media was becoming digital media. Then interactive became the thing that ties all media together. So, the music part of it was music was becoming a digital product, digital distribution. And you saw that happening with film too. Film was uh, influenced in a huge way by technology, and so much film programming, a lot of it wasn't even going into theaters. It was just funneling into platforms like Netflix. And it wasn't too long before streaming became a thing. Streaming was just starting to appear. Social media was a fairly new thing then. And I think it was in 2006 that Twitter was launched at South by Southwest. A lot of us were already using it. In my case, I had a Twitter account uh, sometime before that. Well, probably within months before that, South by Southwest. And I really didn't have a good sense of what Twitter would be good for. And during South by Southwest, what people were using it for was to coordinate, to find each other, to say, well, I'll meet you here. And and it caught on with everybody. So everybody was kind of using it. And then they started using it for more things like, posting, as it was originally intended, microblogs, content. So Twitter launched that whole sort of format, microblog format, caught on at South by Southwest that year. I'm pausing for a moment. And then after that, it was like kind of like Katie barred the door, I guess. So now what we have years later is South by Southwest is not so much just an independent media festival, not heavily dominated by DIY stuff. That was another thing I was going to say. I was trying to open an article in an apparently outmoded format before we started that I had written for Mondo 2000. I covered South by Southwest for Mondo 2000 in, I think, 1994. Mondo 2000 at the time was referred to as a cyberzine. It was kind of a slick digital culture publication. It looked kind of like a fashion magazine. And I was connected with them and did some writing for them. And the editor asked me if I would cover South by Southwest. They'd get me a press pass, which they did. And Monty, again, went with me as photographer. And we just wandered all over South by Southwest. Interestingly, the piece that I ultimately wrote about South by Southwest that year did not get published, which is unfortunate because something was happening at South by Southwest that year that was very striking. And that was that you saw all these instances of small operators, like people who were publishing zines, bands that were recording their own music and putting it onto like CDs, kind of small efforts to do sort of DIY production of media. And of course, at least in the case of the bands, they were like passing these CDs around because they were hoping to get a bigger contract, to get set with a record company. At least most of them, I think, were. But that was what I wrote about. I mean, the article that I wrote in 1994 was about how South by Southwest was a DIY media festival. And I don't remember the particular things that I covered. The thing that sticks in my memory is a zine session that I went to where several zine publishers were holding forth about their publications. And of course, I was the publisher of a zine then too. So that was kind of my world too. And this the kinds of things that I was talking about in that article and that happened there during South by Southwest that year were really influential. You know, it had a big influence on the way things moved forward from there. I don't know how influential it is today.
Well, when that
Maybe
was
less.
happening, is when I had first moved back to Austin. And I was really impressed by what I was seeing that was happening there with all the independent media, because I've been a big fan of do-it-yourself media for a long time. I've done it myself for a long time, and I was really encouraged that somebody was really, getting a chance to get out there and, have a big, you know, uh, a big media festival. And unfortunately, it went from that to being a festival of the big media companies is what I've seen for quite a while now. That kind of priced everyone else, the little guys, out of the market.
Well, I mean, that really is what it is today. It's a major festival. It's a major media festival. And the sense of there being an interactive piece has kind of faded away. They still have an interactive badge that's associated with part of the programming there. In other words, they still have the division of music, film, and interactive. But interactive is kind of everything. There's all kinds of programming there. Actually, I was going to talk about the tracks at South by Southwest. Um, there's there's one track called 2050, which is about the future, obviously. And then there's an advertising and brand experience track. There's an artificial intelligence track. Of course, artificial intelligence is currently very sexy, and there's a lot of sessions about it. There's 66 sessions in the artificial intelligence track. There's a climate change track. There's one on creating film and TV. There's one on the creator economy, culture, design, energy, fashion and beauty, film and TV industry, food, the game industry, government and civic engagement, health and med tech, which is 75 sessions, music and tech, music careers. There's a small track on psychedelics. There's like 34 sessions on psychedelics. And they had, in the past, they've had tracks about the cannabis industry, and now it's broader than that because there's a potential for psychedelics to become more widely used and legally used. There's a sports track. There's a track about startups. There's one about the tech industry. There's one about transportation. There's a workplace track. And there's a couple of XR track. Well, there's an XR track that has 50 sessions. There's another track that says XR and Metaverse, but it's only one session. But
It's
XR, of course, being like, oh, go ahead.
well, it's just interesting that I found that by just following what's happening at South by, I can know what is really hot, in the culture, and the fact that psychedelics and AI and artificial, virtual reality, things like that are having a lot of sessions. Kind of tells me that that is what's hot, and that's kind of proved out, because it used to be the hot things were social media or streaming, and then it gets replaced this time. I'm sure AI is going to be where a lot of the focus is during this South by.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to do tonight is kind of show the schedule app or the schedule section of the website for South by Southwest, and talk a little bit about the navigation and the content, some of the things that they have in there. And if you look at this thing, there's several sections here. You can go to the full schedule and there's various ways to filter it. And then you've got some like subs here where you could go, say, you could just go to film and TV sessions or music festival presenters, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's my favorites. So uh, you can look at the things that you've actually well, you click a star on something, it becomes one of your favorites. And that's the way that you can build your own schedule, which you can export as an ICS file so you can load it into a calendar, which I've done. But here, if you click through on the full schedule, here you have it set for all days. So you go through and everything, but oh, well, it defaults to the first day, March 8th. So I can remove that default. And then what happens? That should have, yeah, that has all days on it. But then you have these various other ways to filter it. So you can filter by, say, event type. There we go. So, and as you can see, there's various types. Look at all the types of events. There's showcases, sessions, screenings, special events, comedy events. There's a whole comedy. There's actually a comedy festival happening. It's like 37 things included. And then you got lounges and exhibitions and things like that, and networking. That's probably meetups. Um, but if you look at the sessions, these are just conference sessions, 1,744 of them. That's a lot. And then if you go down here, you can think about like there's music you can sort by age policy. That's interesting. And then you have formats down here, which is kind of like the kinds of sessions they are. Book readings, featured sessions, keynotes. There's 8 keynotes listed, which we can talk about in a minute. These meetups, you know, they've got 94 meetups. Meetups are just people coming together to hang out and talk about a particular one thing. And those are pretty good. They used to have something called core conversations, which were kind of smaller events that were kind of like that. Somebody would come in with an idea and they would agree to show up and sort of lead the discussion with a bunch of people. So it was a conversation. It was a smaller set of people in a conversation.
Looks
And
like
those were pretty
the
good. They don't do them anymore.
the mentor sessions, there's a lot of those. What exactly do they consider a mentor section?
Let's click it and see what we see. There we go. Takes a minute. I'm sure this is under heavy use right now. I bet there's people who are just now working on this thing to figure out what they want to do. So basically, this lists a bunch of mentors from particular lines of work,
A lot
and it
of
kind of tells you where
influencers,
they're
it looks
coming
like.
from. Yeah, exactly. There's all kinds of people. I've done mentoring at South by Southwest before. I used to sign up for it. I haven't done it in a while. It's kind of cool. It's kind of fun. I mean, you'll have people who come to you and you just kind of like give them some guidance. I don't know how those sessions work now. I'm wondering if they have like a room full of people and it's basically more like a speaker than a one-to-one mentoring. I'm not sure how they're doing it, but shows you that. And then we can take a quick look at these keynotes that are coming up. One interesting thing is there's well, I'll show it to you. Let's see if I can get this thing checked. There, nope. Lost it. Didn't mean to do that one. Give me a sec here. I believe that I have this already open. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Nope. I thought I did. So this is taking me a minute to try to make this thing work.
The keynotes have, in past years been, especially during the political years, election years, those have been uh, attracting a lot of the movers and shakers and whatever political races are going on, and I would expect there'd be some interest of that sort of thing. Is that what they have scheduled? Is because I remember they had what was it? Oh, they had Obama here.
I can show you. There we are. Oh, we got it. So you see that this one is about the growth of women's sports. This one is Lisa Su in conversation with Ryan Patel. Lisa Su is I believe, the CEO of AMD. So this would be about like the tech industry. And here's one where the Daniels are going to give a keynote about how they pulled off Everything Everywhere All at Once. Everything Everywhere All at Once was the Best Picture winner at the Academy Awards. I guess it was last year. And it was premiered last year at South by Southwest. So it was like, here's this big hit film. It turned out to be a pretty big hit, and it premiered at South by Southwest. And this boosted the credibility of the film conference somewhat. And now they're starting to want to break all kinds of films there. I say it was last year. It might have been 2022. Anyway, so they're going to come in and talk about their film. And then Dr. Joy Buolamwini from the Algorithmic Justice League. She's an AI bias expert. So I believe she will be talking about AI to some extent. Let's see. Oh, here's one that we didn't see. How women lead on and off screen. This is a very interesting set of speakers. You've got Katie Couric, Erin Haynes, Brooke Shields, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, and Nancy Wang Yuan. And this is tomorrow, actually, tomorrow afternoon. Should be a pretty interesting conversation. It's about women's representation in media.
That's an interesting lineup of people, all over the place.
Absolutely. I was thinking to go to that one. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it, but I will try. Here's one called Privacy in Progress. And this is Dion Castaneda and Tracy Chow. They're both from Block Party. And they're just talking about data privacy, apparently. Sue Bird and Jessica Robertson about sports. We saw that earlier. And Lisa Sue, the Daniels. Okay, here we are. The Black Keys are going to give the music keynote. And the last one here is from Patreon. Jack Conte is going to talk about death of the follower and the future of creativity on the web, which sounds pretty interesting. And the idea here is, it says the current internet algorithms are killing the traditional follower for creators, threatening their creative freedom and livelihoods. The internet started as a platform that democratized creative distribution. You could upload your works to various platforms, YouTube, etc., and then ways to build a following and so forth. But now that you have algorithms that are selecting what's presented to people, and I guess his contention here is that it it is diminishing the follower, the concept of the follower, because stuff is just kind of served to you or delivered to you or shown to you, um, regardless of whether you've subscribed or followed or whatever. I don't know what I
Facebook's
think of
the
that.
Facebook is the poster child for that whole problem. If you
Yeah,
remember all the people who you used to hear from, you probably don't anymore. You're hearing from people that you have no idea how they got on your feed.
yeah. I mean, that's basically it. You can follow a set of people, but what you're seeing is not necessarily content that was served by those people. There's other stuff mixed in there, and they do it because they want to drive engagement, and sometimes they do it because they're paid to do it. I mean, some
Yeah,
of it is advertising.
they do it because money.
Indeed. So anyway, that this schedule app is pretty interesting. I've been kind of banging around on it. There's a lot of new films that are going to be on. In using this thing, you've got you got page unresponsive is what you got. There we go. You've got various other things here. Obviously, you can see the various sections. It doesn't list interactive though. It's got film and TV and music. Everything else is interactive. And you've got, various pictures. You can also see the exhibitors and brands. And you can see attendees. You can see venues and maps, it says. There's a whole list of venues on there, and you can sort by venue. Like you can just pick a spot, and if you want to hang there, you can just kind of see who all is going to show up there.
I see the
So
Unleashed
that,
East Army Functional Fitness. Apparently, there are a lot of military related um, things going on.
well, you will see here that the U.S. Army is one of the sponsors of South by Southwest this year.
And that's caused some uproar among some of the more progressive maybe participants or people who wanted to be involved until they saw that that was one of the sponsors. I've read a few articles about people being upset. I mean, that's just one of those things that if you want to have an event, you kind of have to take whatever sponsors are available. And I guess they were available.
Yeah, what is their complaint exactly?
There's a lot of people just don't want to be associated with anything that's involving the military. Just it's a lot of the old anti-war, pacifist movement, and yeah, I can see a lot of their point there.
I don't know. We may be counting on the military to save us soon enough.
Well, actually, we're counting on the voters to save us if we if we're
Well,
talking about that same thing.
that's right now. Oops, sorry. That's right now, but if the voters can't do it, the military might have to. That's off topic though, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway,
So you're not going to South by Southwest this year,
nope,
I
nope,
take it.
no. The last time I participated was when it was the online thing during the lockdowns, and that was interesting. But I found a lot more things that I need to do that don't involve getting into big traffic jams and big jams of people.
Well, we went yesterday to pick up our badges. There were four of us, Marcia and I, and Bruce Sterling and Yasmina Chisanovich. And of course, we had to find a place to park, $20, $20 to park to go pick up our badges. And then there's another conference that precedes South by Southwest. It's called South by Southwest Education. So there were a bunch of educators there. That conference was going on. It used to be that you picked up your badges later in the week, right? But now they have this week-long ability for you to pick up your badges. very streamlined. There was almost nobody there picking up badges. We went at an off time, and they had the capacity to like probably put thousands of people through the lines there to get their passes. And like I say, it works really quickly. They're very well streamlined. And everything is very well run. If you wonder why I'm coughing, it's partly because Alternaria, a nasty little mold, is in the air at the moment. It's a very bad time for allergies.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around. I'm out here in the Magic Forest, and it's allergy central out here. You name a pollen, and I've got some plants that are growing it and dispersing it around the neighborhood. So I just keep a backpack full of Claritin handy, and it comes in handy in this neighborhood.
Cedar and elm are pretty bad right now.
Yeah, and I'm
So
surrounded by cedar trees, so that's a lot of fun.
So South by Southwest has had a pretty big impact. And of course, we've talked a little bit about how it's changed and it's become big. It's become about big media and less about the DIY stuff. One change that occurred with South by Southwest uh, was a couple of years ago. And as you know, in 2020, the mayor of Austin, well, the city of Austin, shut the event down because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And of
We
course,
all remember that.
that was that would have had a tremendous financial impact on South by Southwest. And within a couple of years after that, Jay Penske Media bought, I guess, half of South by Southwest. They bought into it and are part of it now. I'm not sure what impact that's had. I don't see significant changes. What I've seen over the years is that they've become much more adept and better organized. I mean, they run a pretty great event there. Everything's put together really well. I think we already saw the trajectory away from the more independent DIY stuff toward more corporate stuff. So I don't think Penske changed that at all. So I'm really not sure. I know that Penske has become a real force in entertainment. That group has bought, or Penske Media has also bought Variety, and they own Rolling Stone now as well. And I'm not sure what else they might own, but that's something right there.
Yeah, the big impact I saw on Austin was as the corporate events began happening, the big corporate events, the cost of doing anything in South by Southwest went dramatically up. I remember, we were doing our Plutopia events, and places that we were able to rent back, then in like what 2010, 2011, you just couldn't get those at any price. They were booked years in advance for exorbitant amounts. Stuff that used to rent for $5,000 was suddenly 20 grand.
And we couldn't do that now. It's sort of like, well, I guess it's a kind of gentrification. You see places where these really nice little funky shops and bars that have been around for years suddenly disappear, and it's because they lost their lease because it became too expensive to stay there because the area is becoming more aggressively popular than it was.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of those people are coming out to my neighborhood out here in Elgin. We're getting a lot of people who used to do business, and especially artists and musicians are moving here, all the time. I've seen new people setting up shop in this part of Bastrop County. This is the less conservative part of Bastrop County.
Yeah, and here in South Austin, it's sort of like the last stand for the old Austin hippie culture. And we have bars here that are a lot like the bars that we went to many years ago. Um, Be Up is one in Sam's Town Point.
Yeah,
And they're
the expense of just doing anything in Austin has gone way up, and it's unfortunate that a lot of these really good businesses could probably survive if it wasn't for the rents.
they're doing a big showcase at Sam's Town Point. Ah, here it is. I'll give them a shameless plug here.
Plug away.
Well, it would be shameless if it was plugging me in. It's not. So Sam's Town Point is this great little club out here in Austin. It's a bar. It's a very funky, old-fashioned bar. And during South by Southwest, they're having the dance, this big event with a number of bands, including our pal Kev Russell at Shiny Ribs is going to be there. Reckless Kelly, Silverado, Willis Allen Ramsey, just a bunch of them, man. It's gonna be huge. They're also going to have some DJ sets, uh, and I think it's like the tickets are like $60 a piece, I think. But this is one of the things you see in Austin is like an alternative to South by Southwest while it's going on.
Yeah, you
And
see a
then
lot of
there's
bands getting gigs that aren't related, aren't connected to South by, but they are able to get it to some of the smaller venues. And you see a lot of pop-up
yeah.
venues being created.
And I guess in our last couple of minutes here, I mentioned that there's a lot of free stuff going on, including down at the lake, um, at Lady Bird Lake. There on the shores, there's going to be kind of ongoing free music. I'm not exactly sure the dates for that, but I have talked to people who I'll say, are you going to South by Southwest this year? And say, well, I'll be at South by Southwest, but I'm not going to have a badge. I'm just going to be doing the free stuff, and it's everywhere. There's lots of it. So Austin becomes a different city during South by Southwest. And the population increases by what, 18,000 people or something. Huge numbers of people down there.
Well, I'll be throwing an event out here in my backyard, and if you're in the neighborhood, come on by. I'll be doing my notorious version of Stairway to Heaven on kazoo and many other big hits. So come on down.
And I'll be introducing Bruce Sterling when he gives his talk at South by Southwest. I should look that up and give you a date for that, shouldn't I?
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's
one
on the
thing I
14th.
I do miss being able to hear Bruce's addresses, because that's where you actually learn what's really important. You know, everyone that I've listened to was something I didn't know, and he made it really. His presentations are always great.
Well, he's going to give a talk 4 o'clock on the 14th um, at Salon J in the Hilton. And it's called Analog Punk or Tools, Shoes, and Misery. Uh, he says if you're a handcrafting peasant who lacks any industrial products, then you're in for a barefoot life of strenuous misery. However, if you're in a modern, cyberized, late capitalist environment and you also tote some neato hand tools, you can hack the living daylights out of stuff. So come in here while our world features novel oddities like pocket jewelry and luxury multi-tools.
Okay.
Leave it to Bruce to fly against the wind.
Well,
All right.
that's a good thing. We should all be flying against the wind. Yeah, that's the direction. That's the direction to go these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I think there was some question. I don't think we're going to be able to do this next week. Uh, I can't be available next week, so I guess we'll be back here in a couple of weeks.
Same bat time, same bat channel, same batshit people.
Right on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John, and